Have you ever smiled at a dinner table while your heart was quietly breaking? I have. If you had walked into that beautiful dining room that night, you would have thought you were looking at the perfect family. The table was covered with expensive dishes. Soft music played in the background. Everyone laughed as if life couldn't be any better. But behind those smiles, something ugly was waiting for me. By the end of that dinner, I would lose my marriage, my place in that family, and almost my confidence. What they didn't know was that their biggest mistake wasn't humiliating me. Their biggest mistake was believing I would stay the same person after that night. My name is Daniel. For years, I believed kindness could fix almost anything. I believed if you worked hard, treated people with respect, and loved your family honestly, everything would eventually fall into place. I was wrong. Sometimes the people who smile at you across the dinner table are the same people quietly hoping you fail, and sometimes the loudest betrayal doesn't come from an enemy, it comes from the person sitting right beside you. Looking back now, I can still remember every little detail from that evening: the smell of fresh bread, the sound of glasses touching, the warm lights hanging above the dining table. Even now, years later, those memories feel sharper than they should. Because that was the night everything changed. It was my mother-in-law's birthday. My wife, Emily, had spent weeks talking about the celebration. "Please," she told me that morning with a nervous smile, "just try to keep everyone happy tonight." At the time, I thought it was a strange thing to say. Why would I need to keep everyone happy? I had never started an argument with anyone in her family. I always brought gifts. I always helped clean after dinner. I never raised my voice. If anything, I tried too hard to earn their approval, but no matter what I did, it was never enough. My father-in-law barely looked at me whenever we spoke. My brother-in-law treated every conversation like a competition, and my mother-in-law, she had perfected the art of smiling while making someone feel completely worthless. The comments were always small. "So, how's that little job of yours going?" "Oh, that's a nice shirt. It almost looks expensive." "I just worry about Emily. She deserves stability." Every sentence sounded polite. Every word carried a hidden message. "You don't belong here." Emily always told me to ignore it. "They don't mean it like that. They're just old-fashioned. They'll accept you eventually." I wanted to believe her, because I loved her. Love has a strange way of making us excuse things we should never accept. That evening, I arrived carrying a carefully wrapped birthday gift. It wasn't the most expensive present in the room, but I had spent days choosing something I thought her mother would genuinely enjoy. As I walked inside, everyone greeted each other warmly. Hugs, laughter, friendly conversations. For a brief moment, I thought maybe tonight would be different. Maybe this would finally be the evening they saw me as family. I couldn't have been more wrong. Dinner started peacefully. People shared stories. Children laughed from another room. Wine glasses were filled again and again. I relaxed. Maybe Emily had worried for nothing. Then my brother-in-law leaned back in his chair and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile someone wears when they're about to enjoy another person's embarrassment. "So, Daniel," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "tell us. Have you finally figured out what you're doing with your life?" The room became quiet. I laughed softly, trying to keep the mood light. "I actually enjoy my work." He nodded slowly. "Sure. But enjoying your job and actually succeeding aren't exactly the same thing." A few people chuckled. I noticed Emily staring down at her plate. She didn't say a word. I answered calmly, "I'm proud of where I am." Before I could say anything else, my mother-in-law joined the conversation. "Pride is nice," she said, "but pride doesn't pay for the future." More laughter. Someone whispered something I couldn't hear. Then another joke, another smile, another little cut hidden inside polite conversation. Each comment by itself wasn't enough to start an argument. Together, they became impossible to ignore. I looked toward Emily. She finally raised her eyes. For 1 second, I hoped she would defend me. Instead, she forced a small smile and quietly said, "Maybe they're just trying to help." That sentence hurt more than every joke combined, because in that moment, I realized I was sitting completely alone. I didn't know it yet, but the worst part of the night hadn't even happened. And when it finally did, no one at that table would ever forget what came next. Emily's words echoed in my head. Maybe they're just trying to help. Help? Was that what this was supposed to be? I looked around the table again. No one seemed uncomfortable. No one looked embarrassed. Instead, they smiled politely, passed dishes to one another, and continued eating as if nothing unusual had happened. That was the moment I understood something that took me years to accept. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a tradition. I had been invited to that table, not as family, but as the evening's entertainment. My father-in-law finally spoke. He had been quiet all night, carefully watching every reaction. He slowly put down his fork and looked directly at me. "Daniel," he said calmly, "a man should be able to give his wife security." "I agree," I answered. "So tell me," he continued, "where do you see yourself in 5 years?" It sounded like a normal question, but everyone knew it wasn't. Before I could answer, my brother-in-law laughed, hopefully still employed. The table burst into laughter again. I forced a smile. "I have goals," I said. "I'm working toward them every day." My mother-in-law sighed dramatically. "Goals are wonderful," she said, "but Emily can't build a future on dreams." The words landed like stones. I glanced at Emily again. She looked nervous. She knew this had gone too far. But she still stayed silent. Silence can be louder than insults. And that silence broke something inside me. I took a slow breath and reminded myself why I had always chosen peace. I didn't want to ruin a birthday. I didn't want to create a scene. Most of all, I didn't want Emily to feel caught between me and her family. So I smiled again. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who stay calm. But staying calm doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It only means you've learned how to hide it. A few minutes later, dinner was almost over. Dessert was served. Someone brought out the birthday cake. Everyone gathered around and sang together. For a few minutes, the tension disappeared, or at least, that's what I thought. After the candles were blown out, my mother-in-law stood up with her glass. "I'd like to make a small toast," she announced. Everyone became quiet. She smiled warmly. "First, thank you all for being here tonight." People nodded. She thanked relatives, friends, and neighbors one by one. Then she looked at Emily. "My beautiful daughter." Emily smiled proudly. "You deserve the very best life has to offer." I smiled too. I thought she was about to say something kind about us. Instead, she turned toward me. "And Daniel," she paused just long enough to make everyone look in my direction. "I truly hope that one day you become the husband Emily deserves." The room fell completely silent. Nobody laughed this time. Nobody spoke. Every eye was on me. It felt as though the air had disappeared. I could hear my own heartbeat. Emily whispered softly, "Mom." But it was too late. Her mother continued, "You seem like a nice man. But being nice isn't enough. A husband should inspire confidence. He should lead. He should provide. And honestly, I've always wondered if Emily settled for less." Those words didn't just hurt, they stripped away every ounce of dignity I had left. I looked at my wife. Our eyes met. This was her moment. One sentence, one simple sentence could have changed everything. She could have said, "That's enough. He is my husband. I won't let anyone disrespect him." Instead, she lowered her eyes. She said nothing, and in that silence, I realized I wasn't losing their respect. I had never had it. I quietly placed my napkin on the table. I stood up. No anger, no shouting, no dramatic speech, just silence. Because sometimes walking away says more than 1,000 words. As I reached the front door, I heard someone behind me say, "Oh, come on, can't he take a joke?" Another voice answered, "I guess the truth hurts." I didn't turn around. I opened the door, stepped into the cold night, and closed it behind me. They believed they had just embarrassed me. They had no idea. That was the last night I would ever beg for their acceptance, and without realizing it, they had just started a chain of events that would change every one of their lives forever. The cold night air hit my face the moment I stepped outside. For a few seconds, I just stood there. The sounds of laughter from inside the house still reached me through the closed door. It was strange. Only a few feet separated me from that dining room, yet it felt like I had already left an entire chapter of my life behind. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and sat in silence. I didn't start the engine. I didn't check my phone. I simply stared through the windshield, trying to understand what had just happened. One question kept repeating in my mind. How did it come to this? Because the truth is, it hadn't started that night. It had started years earlier, on a rainy afternoon when I met Emily for the first time. Back then, my life was simple. I wasn't rich. I didn't come from a powerful family. I worked hard, paid my bills on time, and dreamed of building a peaceful future. Success to me wasn't about expensive cars or giant houses. It was about coming home to someone who truly loved me. Then I met Emily. She walked into the small bookstore where I worked part-time while building my career. She was looking for a novel that had just sold out. "I guess I'm too late," she said with a disappointed smile. "I think I can help," I replied. I searched the storage room for nearly 15 minutes. Hidden behind a stack of unopened boxes was the last copy. When I handed it to her, her face lit up. "You actually found it." "It was hiding," I joked. She laughed. That laugh stayed in my mind long after she left. A week later, she came back. Not because she needed another book. She admitted later that she had hoped to see me again. That simple visit turned into coffee. Coffee became long conversations. Those conversations slowly became love. For nearly 2 years, everything felt easy. Emily believed in me. She encouraged every dream I shared. Whenever I doubted myself, she reminded me why I had started. "I know you'll make it," she always said, and every time she smiled, I believed her. When I asked her to marry me, she didn't hesitate. She said yes before I even finished the question. I truly believed I was the luckiest man alive. Then, I met her family. At first, they seemed warm enough. They welcomed me with polite smiles and careful questions. But it didn't take long to notice something. Every conversation somehow returned to one subject: money. What kind of car did I drive? How much did I earn? What neighborhood did I live in? Where did I see myself in 10 years? I answered honestly. I wasn't ashamed of my life. I believed honesty mattered more than appearances. Looking back now, that may have been my first mistake. One evening, after one of our family dinners, Emily apologized during the drive home. "I'm sorry if Dad asked too many questions." "It's fine," I said. "He just wants the best for you." She smiled with relief. "I knew you'd understand." At the time, I thought understanding was the same as solving the problem. It wasn't. The questions slowly became comparisons. Emily's cousin had just bought a luxury home. Her brother had received another promotion. A family friend had started a successful company. Every achievement became another reason to remind me that I wasn't enough. They never said it directly, not at first. Instead, they wrapped every insult inside fake concern. "We're only thinking about Emily. We just want her to be happy. You seem like a nice guy." There was always a but, and that tiny word slowly poisoned every family gathering. I kept telling myself things would improve. I worked longer hours, I took extra projects, I saved every dollar I could, not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted to give Emily the life she deserved. The sad part? She never asked me to prove myself. Her family did, and without realizing it, I started living to earn the approval of people who had already decided they would never give it. I just didn't know it yet. What I also didn't know was that someone at that dinner table had been quietly hiding a secret from everyone. A secret that would eventually expose who truly deserved respect, and who had been pretending all along. That secret didn't reveal itself overnight. Like everything else in that family, it stayed hidden behind perfect smiles, expensive clothes, and carefully chosen words. From the outside, they looked like the kind of family everyone admired: holiday photos, weekend barbecues, birthday parties, anniversary celebrations. If you looked at their social media, you'd think they had the perfect life. But I had spent enough time around them to notice something different. Every conversation felt like a competition. Who earned the most money? Who bought the newest car? Whose children attended the best schools? Love wasn't measured by kindness, it was measured by success, and success was measured by money. The first person who truly opened my eyes wasn't Emily, it was her grandmother. Everyone called her Grandma Rose. Unlike the rest of the family, she never cared about expensive things. She cared about people. At every family gathering, she'd quietly invite me to sit beside her. "So, Daniel," she'd ask, "how are you really doing?" Not, "How's work?" Not, "How much are you making?" Just, "How are you?" At first, I always answered with a smile. "I'm doing great." She would nod, but I could tell she didn't believe me. One afternoon, after another uncomfortable family lunch, she stopped me as I was leaving. "Walk with me for a minute." We stepped into her small backyard. She watered a row of colorful flowers before speaking again. "Do you know why flowers grow so well here?" I smiled. "Because you take good care of them?" She laughed softly. "That's part of it." Then she looked directly at me. "But flowers also need the right soil." I wasn't sure what she meant. She continued, "A good seed cannot grow in poisoned ground." Those words stayed with me. At the time, I thought she was talking about gardening. Years later, I realized she had been talking about people. As the months passed, Emily became busier with work. We still loved each other. At least I believed we did. But something had changed. Whenever her family criticized me, she stopped defending me. Whenever they made jokes, she laughed politely. Whenever I brought it up later, she'd sigh. "Can't we just let it go?" I always did, because I thought choosing peace meant staying silent. I couldn't see that my silence was teaching everyone that disrespect had no consequences. Then came the weekend that changed everything. Emily's parents invited us to their lake house. "It'll be relaxing," Emily promised. "No stress, just family." I wanted to believe her, so we packed our bags and drove there on a bright Saturday morning. The lake was beautiful. The weather was perfect. For the first few hours, everything actually felt normal. We grilled burgers, played board games, laughed together. I remember thinking, maybe things are finally getting better. But sometimes, the calmest moments come just before the biggest storm. That evening, while everyone was inside preparing dinner, I walked outside to get more drinks from the garage refrigerator. As I reached the door, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. I wasn't trying to listen, but then I heard my name. "Daniel." I froze. It was Emily's brother. "He'll never be on our level." Someone chuckled. Then my mother-in-law answered, "I've been saying that from the beginning." Another voice asked quietly, "So why did Emily marry him?" There was a short silence. Then my father-in-law replied, "Because she thought she could fix him." The room filled with light laughter. My hands tightened around the bottle I was holding. Then came the sentence that hurt more than anything else. Emily spoke, softly, quietly. "I know. I just thought things would be different by now." My heart sank. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood. I wanted to believe there was more to the conversation, but I couldn't make myself walk into that kitchen. Instead, I quietly placed the drinks back inside the refrigerator. I walked toward the lake, and for the first time since our wedding, I wondered if I was fighting for a marriage that only one person wanted to save. Little did I know, the answer to that question was already waiting for me, and it would arrive in the form of one unexpected phone call that would change everything. I stood at the edge of the lake until the sun disappeared behind the trees. The water was perfectly still. If someone had looked at me from a distance, they probably would have thought I was enjoying the view. The truth was, I wasn't seeing the lake at all. I was replaying Emily's words over and over. "I just thought things would be different by now." Different. What did that mean? Did she expect me to become someone else? To earn more money? To impress her parents? Or had she slowly started believing everything they said about me? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. I took a deep breath and walked back toward the house, pretending nothing had happened. When I stepped inside, everyone smiled as if they hadn't spent the last few minutes talking about me. "Daniel," my father-in-law called. "There you are. We were wondering where you went." "I just needed some fresh air," I replied. No one asked another question. Dinner continued. Everyone laughed, everyone smiled, and I played my part. Sometimes pretending you're okay is easier than explaining why you're not. That night, Emily fell asleep almost immediately. I couldn't. The conversation from the kitchen kept echoing in my mind. Around midnight, I quietly got out of bed and walked onto the porch. The air was cool. The entire neighborhood was silent. For the first time in years, I questioned every decision I had made. Had I ignored too many warning signs? Had I mistaken patience for strength? Was I holding on to a relationship that had already begun slipping away? My phone suddenly vibrated in my pocket, an unknown number. Normally, I ignored calls that late. Something told me to answer. "Hello?" For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then a woman's voice spoke. "Is this Daniel?" "Yes." "I'm sorry to call so late. I wasn't sure if I should." I frowned. "Who is this?" "My name doesn't matter." "There are things you deserve to know." Every instinct told me to hang up. It sounded strange, almost unreal, but before I could say anything, she continued. "I work with someone close to your family. You've been lied to." Those 5 words made my heart race. "What are you talking about?" "I can't explain everything over the phone, but you need to stop believing that you're the problem." I stood completely still. "What do you mean?" Another pause. Then she said something I never expected. "Daniel, someone has been making sure you'll never be accepted." The porch suddenly felt colder. I gripped the phone tighter. "Who?" "I can't tell you yet. But ask yourself one question. Who benefits if you always feel like you're not good enough?" Before I could respond, the call ended. I stared at the screen. The number had already disappeared. No voicemail, no message, nothing. For several minutes, I simply stood there. Had someone been playing a cruel joke? Or had a stranger just confirmed the fear I'd been carrying for years? I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, everyone acted as though nothing had happened. Breakfast was cheerful, coffee was served, plans were made for the afternoon. I looked around the table. Every face seemed normal. Every smile looked convincing. But now, I couldn't stop wondering, which one of them had something to hide, and why would a complete stranger risk calling me in the middle of the night? I had no idea. But deep inside, I made a quiet promise to myself. For the first time, I wasn't going to ignore the signs. I wasn't going to stay silent just to keep the peace. If there was a truth hidden beneath years of insults and quiet humiliation, I was going to find it, no matter where it led. What I didn't know was that my search would uncover a betrayal far bigger than a few cruel comments at the dinner table. It would reveal a secret that had been buried for years, a secret that would turn the entire family against itself. The drive home was unusually quiet. Emily scrolled through her phone while soft music played through the speakers. Normally, we would talk about the weekend or laugh about something small. This time, neither of us said much. I kept thinking about the phone call. "Someone has been making sure you'll never be accepted." Those words refused to leave my mind. I wanted to ask Emily if she knew anything, but another voice inside me stopped me. Not yet. If someone really had been manipulating the situation for years, asking questions too soon could warn them. So I stayed quiet. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to things I had ignored before. Not spying, not accusing anyone, just observing. And the more I observed, the more uncomfortable I became. Whenever Emily's parents called, she almost always left the room to answer. When I walked in unexpectedly, the conversations ended quickly. "It's nothing," she'd say with a smile. "We were just talking." I wanted to believe her, but trust had started to crack. A few days later, something small happened at work. My manager called me into his office. "Daniel," he said, "you've been offered a chance to lead the new client project." I was surprised. "It comes with a raise," he added. For a moment, I forgot everything else. This was the opportunity I had been working toward for years. I thanked him and immediately called Emily. I have good news. She sounded excited. What happened? I got promoted. There was a short silence. Then she laughed. I'm so proud of you. For the first time in weeks, I smiled without forcing it. Let's celebrate tonight. I'd love that, she replied. For a few hours, everything felt normal again. Maybe life was finally turning around. That evening, we met at our favorite little restaurant. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place where we had celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and countless ordinary Tuesdays. The waitress recognized us. The usual, she asked. Emily smiled. Of course. For a while, we talked about the future, the promotion, saving for a house, travel plans. The conversation felt easy, just like it had years ago. Then Emily's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Her smile disappeared. I have to take this. She stepped outside. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. When she finally returned, she looked different. What happened? I asked. It's nothing. I recognized that answer immediately. It's your parents, isn't it? She hesitated. They just have concerns. About what? She looked down at the table. They think the promotion isn't enough. I blinked. What? They think you should already be much further in your career. For a second, I couldn't even respond. I had just received the biggest promotion of my life. And somehow, it still wasn't enough. I laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe it. If I became CEO tomorrow, I asked gently, would they finally approve? Emily didn't answer. Her silence told me everything. There would always be another reason. A bigger house, a newer car, a higher salary, another achievement. The finish line would keep moving forever. Because the goal had never been for me to succeed. The goal had been to make sure I always felt like I hadn't. That night, after Emily went to bed, I opened my laptop. For the first time, I began writing down every strange thing I could remember from the past few years. Every insult, every awkward conversation, every canceled plan, every unexplained argument, every moment that didn't make sense. At first, it looked like random memories. Then, a pattern started to appear, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Someone wasn't just criticizing me, someone had been quietly shaping the way everyone saw me, every joke, every rumor, every concern. They all seemed to begin with the same person. I stared at the name I'd written at the top of the page. My mother-in-law. I wanted to believe I was wrong. I prayed I was wrong, because if I was right, then the dinner where they humiliated me wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the result of a plan that had been unfolding for years. And I had only just begun to uncover the truth. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the list I had made. Every memory pointed in the same direction, every argument, every awkward family gathering, every time I felt like an outsider, there was always one person at the center of it, my mother-in-law. Still, I didn't want to accuse anyone without proof. Feelings weren't enough. I needed facts. So instead of confronting anyone, I decided to do something I should have done years earlier. I started paying attention instead of making excuses. A week later, Emily told me we had been invited to another family dinner. Normally, I would have found an excuse to stay home. This time, I agreed immediately. Emily looked surprised. I thought you wouldn't want to go. I don't, I admitted. But avoiding them won't solve anything. She smiled, relieved. I'm glad. She had no idea I wasn't going there to earn anyone's approval anymore. I was going there to observe. The dinner felt strangely familiar. The same dining room, the same polished table, the same carefully prepared meals, even the same seats. It was almost like nothing had changed, but everything had, because this time I wasn't trying to fit in. I was watching. Within 20 minutes, I noticed something interesting. Whenever someone complimented me, my mother-in-law would gently change the subject. If Emily mentioned one of my achievements, she'd immediately bring up someone else's success. It was subtle, so subtle that most people would never notice. But once I saw it, I couldn't stop seeing it. My father-in-law said, "Daniel's company seems to be doing well." Before anyone could respond, she smiled. Yes, but these days everyone changes jobs so often. Nothing is guaranteed. The compliment disappeared. A few minutes later, Emily mentioned my recent promotion. Oh, that's wonderful, her mother replied. Then she added with a soft laugh, I just hope the pressure doesn't become too much for him. Again, a compliment, followed by doubt. It happened over and over again. Not once, not twice, dozens of times. By the end of dinner, I understood her strategy. She never attacked me directly. She simply made sure every positive moment ended with uncertainty. It was like watching someone slowly erase a picture one tiny stroke at a time. As everyone moved into the living room for dessert, Grandma Rose quietly walked over to me. You noticed it, didn't you? She asked. I looked at her. Noticed what? She gave me a gentle smile. The way she speaks. I didn't answer. Grandma Rose nodded. I've been watching it for years. Those words caught me completely off guard. You knew? I suspected. Why didn't anyone say anything? She sighed deeply, because people become comfortable with patterns. When something happens little by little, they stop seeing it. She looked toward the living room where everyone was laughing. Your mother-in-law doesn't shout. She doesn't insult people openly. She simply plants little seeds, and over time, people start believing them. I felt a chill run down my spine, because that was exactly how it had felt. Not one big attack, thousands of tiny ones, each small enough to ignore. Together, powerful enough to change how everyone saw me. Grandma Rose gently touched my arm. Daniel, don't let other people decide who you are. Some people feel taller by making everyone else feel smaller. Before I could answer, Emily called my name from across the room. There you are. We're taking a family picture. I smiled politely and walked over. The photographer counted down. 3, 2, 1. Everyone smiled. The flash went off. Looking at that picture later, no one would ever guess what was really happening. It looked like a happy family, but hidden behind every smile was a truth that was finally beginning to surface, and I was closer than ever to discovering why my mother-in-law had spent years trying to convince everyone that I would never be enough. A few days after that family dinner, life seemed to return to normal. I went to work. Emily went to work. We smiled at each other every morning and wished each other a good day. From the outside, nothing had changed, but inside, I wasn't the same person anymore. I had stopped trying to prove my worth. Now, I wanted the truth. One Tuesday afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet. Emily was still at work. As I picked up the stack of mail from the front porch, one envelope immediately caught my attention. It had no return address, only my name. Daniel Harper. The handwriting looked unfamiliar. For a moment, I considered throwing it away. After the strange phone call, anonymous messages made me uneasy. Still, curiosity won. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. No greeting, no signature, just one sentence. If you want answers, look at what happened before your wedding, not after it. I read it again. And again. What happened before the wedding? I sat down at the kitchen table trying to make sense of it. Before the wedding? That had been the happiest time of my life, or at least that's what I had believed. Then a memory surfaced. About 3 months before our wedding, I had been invited to dinner by Emily's parents. Emily couldn't attend because she was working late. It was just me, her mother, and her father. At the time, I thought they wanted to get to know me better. Now, I remembered how strange that evening had actually been. Her father had asked dozens of questions about my finances, my savings, my career plans, even whether I had considered changing industries for a higher salary. Meanwhile, her mother had smiled the entire time. She barely spoke, but every time I answered honestly, she exchanged a quick glance with her husband. I hadn't understood those looks back then. Now they bothered me. A lot. That night, after Emily came home, I asked her a simple question. Do you remember that dinner your parents had with me before the wedding? She looked surprised. Of course. Why? I've just been thinking about it. She smiled faintly. My mom said she really liked you after that dinner. I stared at her. She said that? Emily nodded. She told me you were kind, respectful, and that she'd support our marriage. For a second, I couldn't speak. Support our marriage? That didn't match anything I had experienced afterward. Either Emily had been told one story, or I had lived another. There was no way both could be true. That night, after Emily fell asleep, I opened an old storage box in the closet. Inside were wedding invitations, photographs, greeting cards, and an old notebook I hadn't looked at in years. I had completely forgotten about it. Back then, I used to write down important moments in my life. As I flipped through the pages, I found an entry dated 2 weeks before the wedding. One sentence immediately caught my eye. Emily seems worried. She said her parents suddenly have concerns about whether I'm ready for marriage. Strange. They never mentioned that before. I frowned. I kept reading. Another entry. Wedding venue almost canceled today because someone claimed there was confusion about our payment. Thankfully, it was sorted out. Another page. My promotion announcement somehow reached Emily's parents before I even told them. I still don't know how. I slowly closed the notebook. These weren't random events. Individually, they seemed harmless. Together, they formed a pattern. Someone had been interfering long before we ever said, I do. And if that was true, then everything I believed about the beginning of my marriage might have been built on a lie. Just as I reached for my phone to photograph the notebook pages, it rang. The screen showed the same words I had seen once before. Unknown number. This time, I answered immediately. Daniel, the familiar woman's voice said, I see you've started asking the right questions. I stood up. Who are you? I told you before. My name isn't important. What matters, she paused, is that you're finally looking in the right direction. My heart was pounding. Tell me the truth. I will, she replied quietly. But first, you need to find out what disappeared the week before your wedding. Then, the line went dead again. I looked down at my old notebook. A single question echoed through my mind. What had disappeared, and why didn't I remember it? That answer was about to uncover the first real piece of evidence against the person who had spent years controlling the story of my life. I barely slept that night. The anonymous caller's last words kept circling in my mind. Find out what disappeared the week before your wedding. Disappeared. It was such a strange choice of words. Not what happened. Not what went wrong. What disappeared. The next morning, I pulled every old box out of the closet. Wedding invitations, receipts, photo albums, greeting cards, travel confirmations, anything connected to our wedding. The living room floor slowly disappeared beneath stacks of memories. Emily walked downstairs carrying a cup of coffee. She stopped in the doorway. What are you doing? I looked up. Just organizing old things. She smiled. I didn't know you were feeling nostalgic. Neither did I. She kissed my forehead, grabbed her bag, and left for work. The moment the front door closed, I went back to searching. Hours passed. Most of what I found meant nothing. Receipts for flowers, catering invoices, guest lists. Then I opened a small envelope marked important. Inside were copies of several emails I had printed years ago. One email immediately caught my attention. It was from the wedding venue. The subject line read, payment confirmation. I frowned. I clearly remembered paying the deposit, but the email thanked me for sending a second payment after the previous transaction had been canceled. Canceled? That didn't make sense. I dug through more papers until I found my bank statements. There it was. One payment had gone through. A few days later, the exact same amount had been paid again. I had paid twice. At the time, I assumed it had been a banking mistake. The venue later refunded one payment, and I never thought about it again. But now, I wondered why that confusion had happened in the first place. Someone had told the venue my first payment wasn't valid. Who? And why? That afternoon I drove to the cafe where Emily and I used to spend our weekends before we got married. The owner, Mr. Lewis, still recognized me. "Daniel!" "It's been a long time." We shook hands and talked for a while. Then I asked something I wasn't even sure he'd remember. "Do you remember the week before my wedding?" He laughed. "Of course. You looked more stressed than anyone I've ever seen." I smiled. "I've been trying to remember why." His expression changed. "You really don't remember?" "No." He leaned against the counter. "There was a rumor going around that Emily had called off the wedding." I stared at him. "What?" "For about 2 days, everyone thought it was over." I felt my stomach tighten. "I never heard that." He looked genuinely surprised. "I figured someone had told you." "No." He thought for a moment. "I remember because you came in here looking exhausted. You kept checking your phone. You said Emily wasn't answering." Pieces of forgotten memories suddenly flashed through my mind. Missed calls, long hours waiting, feeling confused, then relief when Emily finally contacted me. At the time, she had blamed everything on work and wedding stress. I had accepted that explanation without question. Now, it didn't feel like enough. Before leaving the cafe, Mr. Lewis said something else. "You know, there was a woman asking about you that same week." I turned back. "A woman?" He nodded. "She wasn't rude. But she asked strange questions." "Like what?" He frowned, trying to remember. "She wanted to know whether you seemed nervous, whether you talked about money, and whether you looked ready for marriage." My heart started pounding. "Did she tell you her name?" "No. But I remember one thing. She said she was helping Emily's family." The words hit me like a wave. Helping Emily's family. I thanked him and walked back to my car in complete silence. Every answer seemed to create 2 new questions. Whoever had been working behind the scenes had started long before that humiliating dinner, long before our marriage, maybe even before our engagement. As I sat behind the steering wheel, my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "Mom invited us over for dinner on Saturday. She says she wants to celebrate your promotion." I stared at the screen. Celebrate? After everything? For the first time? I didn't believe a single word. Instead of replying immediately, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The man staring back at me wasn't desperate for approval anymore. He wasn't afraid of uncomfortable conversations. He wasn't trying to become good enough. He wanted one thing: the truth. And if that dinner was another performance, this time I would be ready. Because I had quietly begun collecting pieces of a puzzle, and I had a feeling that someone at that table was about to make a mistake they couldn't take back. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. All week I had thought about that message from Emily. "Mom wants to celebrate your promotion." The words still didn't feel real. For years, every success I had achieved had been met with another comparison, another criticism, or another reminder that I wasn't enough. Why would this time be different? As we drove to her parents' house, Emily reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm really glad you agreed to come." I smiled politely. "So am I." It wasn't a lie. I was glad, just not for the reason she imagined. This time, I wasn't walking into that house hoping to be accepted. I was walking in with my eyes wide open. The moment we stepped through the front door, something felt different. My mother-in-law greeted me with an unusually warm smile. "Daniel, congratulations on your promotion." She even hugged me. That had never happened before. My father-in-law shook my hand firmly. "We're proud of you." "Proud?" The word sounded unfamiliar coming from him. Even my brother-in-law smiled. "Looks like things are finally going your way." For anyone else, it would have seemed like a wonderful evening. For me, it felt rehearsed. Every compliment sounded carefully prepared. Every smile arrived a second too late. I couldn't explain it, but something inside me kept whispering, "Be careful." Dinner began peacefully. Everyone avoided the usual jokes. Instead, they asked about my new responsibilities at work, how many people I would manage, whether I enjoyed the new position, what my future plans were. I answered politely but briefly. For the first time, I noticed something interesting. They weren't asking out of curiosity, they were gathering information. Every answer I gave was followed by a quick glance between my mother-in-law and father-in-law, almost as if they were silently discussing each response. Then came dessert. As coffee was served, my mother-in-law stood up. "I have something for you, Daniel." She walked into another room and returned carrying a neatly wrapped gift box. Everyone watched as she handed it to me. "We're sorry if we've been too hard on you over the years." Emily looked shocked. "So, this is our way of saying congratulations." The room became quiet. I slowly unwrapped the box. Inside was an expensive watch, far more expensive than anything they had ever given me before. I looked up. "You didn't have to do this." "Oh, we wanted to," she replied with a warm smile. The entire moment felt strangely perfect. Too perfect. Something wasn't right. A few minutes later, I excused myself to use the restroom. As I walked down the hallway, I passed the small study where my father-in-law usually handled paperwork. The door wasn't completely closed. I wasn't trying to listen. Then I heard my own name. "Daniel." I stopped. My brother-in-law spoke first. "Do you really think he'll accept it?" My mother-in-law laughed quietly. "He always does." Another voice asked, "And if he finds out?" She answered without hesitation, "He won't." There was complete confidence in her voice, not hope, certainty. I felt a chill run through my body. "Find out what?" I leaned slightly closer. My father-in-law spoke. "The important thing is keeping him focused on the promotion. Once everything is finalized, it won't matter." Everything? Finalized? I barely had time to process the words before footsteps approached the hallway. I quickly continued walking toward the restroom, pretending I had heard nothing. Inside, I locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror. My heartbeat was racing. Something was happening, something much bigger than I had imagined. And somehow, my promotion was connected to it. When I returned to the dining room, everyone was smiling again. Emily looked at me. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just needed a minute." The rest of the evening passed without incident, or at least, that's how it appeared. As we prepared to leave, Grandma Rose quietly slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand. She didn't say a word. She simply looked into my eyes and whispered, "Read it when you're alone." Then she walked away before anyone noticed. I kept the paper hidden in my jacket pocket until we reached home. Emily went upstairs to change into comfortable clothes. The moment I heard the bedroom door close, I unfolded the note. It contained only one sentence. "Stop looking at what they say. Start looking at what they sign." No explanation, no signature, just those 11 words. I read them 3 times. Then I remembered something. Earlier that evening, I had seen a stack of documents on my father-in-law's desk. At the time, I thought they were business papers. Now, I wasn't so sure. If Grandma Rose was right, the truth wasn't hidden in conversations, it was hidden in paperwork, and somewhere inside those documents was the answer to a mystery that had haunted my marriage from the very beginning. Grandma Rose's note stayed on my mind for the rest of the weekend. Stop looking at what they say. Start looking at what they sign. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. For years I had focused on their words, the jokes, the insults, the quiet criticism. But words can be denied, documents cannot. If there was a secret, it wouldn't be hidden in conversations. It would be hidden in paperwork. The problem was, I had no idea what I was looking for. Monday morning started like any other. I arrived at the office early, determined to focus on my new role. For the first hour, I managed to forget everything else. Then my assistant knocked on the door. "Daniel? There's someone here asking for you." "I don't think she wants to schedule an appointment." I frowned. "Who is it?" She wouldn't give her name. My heart skipped a beat. "Send her in." A woman in her early 60s walked into my office. She was neatly dressed and carried a small leather folder. "I won't take much of your time," she said. "I'm a retired legal assistant." I gestured toward the chair. "Please, sit." She looked nervous. "I worked for the attorney who handled some legal matters for Emily's parents years ago." I stayed completely still. What kind of legal matters? I can't discuss confidential details. Not unless they're already public. I nodded. I understand. She took a slow breath. But I can tell you something else. There were documents. Important documents. And I always wondered why your name appeared in conversations, but almost never on the paperwork. I frowned. My name? Yes. It was as though decisions involving you were being made without you. A strange feeling settled over me. What decisions? She shook her head. I honestly don't know. I only organized files. But I remember one thing very clearly. She opened the leather folder and removed a small business card. This attorney retired 3 years ago. But he kept copies of everything. She placed the card on my desk. If anyone still has answers, it'll be him. Before leaving, she looked directly at me. I've carried this guilt for a long time. I don't know whether anyone did anything illegal, but I do know. You deserve to know that questions were being asked behind your back. Then she quietly walked away. For several minutes I stared at the business card. I wasn't sure whether to call. What if it was nothing? What if I had built this entire mystery out of coincidence? Still, I picked up the phone. The retired attorney answered on the third ring. His voice sounded calm and professional. After introducing myself, there was a long silence. Finally, he spoke. I've been expecting someone to call one day. My grip tightened around the phone. You know who I am? Yes. I remember your case. My case? Another pause. Mr. Harper? I think this conversation should happen in person. The next afternoon, I drove to his office on the edge of town. It wasn't a law firm anymore, just a quiet building filled with old files and dusty shelves. He greeted me politely and invited me inside. For a few minutes, we talked about ordinary things. Then he opened a locked cabinet. He carefully removed a thick folder. Across the front, I saw my own name, Daniel Harper. I had never seen the file before. I didn't even know it existed. He placed it on the desk but didn't open it immediately. Before we begin, he said quietly, I need to ask you something. Has anyone in your family ever talked to you about a prenuptial agreement? I blinked. No. We never signed one. He looked down at the folder. That's interesting. My heartbeat quickened. Why? He slowly opened the file. Inside were several documents. Some were incomplete. Some had handwritten notes. One page had my name typed across the top, but the signature line was completely blank. The attorney adjusted his glasses. It appears someone discussed legal protections before your marriage. But according to my records, you were never informed. I felt the room spin. What exactly are you saying? He met my eyes. I'm saying, there were conversations about your future. That happened without your knowledge. And as he turned to the next page, I noticed a familiar signature at the bottom, my mother-in-law's. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just about family opinions anymore. This was something far more serious, something planned, something hidden. And I had only just opened the first file. I couldn't take my eyes off the document. There it was. My mother-in-law's signature, clear, neat, undeniable. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The retired attorney finally broke the silence. Mr. Harper, I need to be very careful about what I say. I am still bound by professional responsibilities. I can't reveal private legal advice that belonged to another client. I nodded. I understand, but... He continued, I can explain the documents that directly involve you. He slid one page across the desk. This draft was never finalized. I looked down. It wasn't a completed agreement. It was a proposal. Several sections were crossed out in red ink. Others had handwritten notes in the margins. One note immediately caught my attention. Delay discussion until after the ceremony. I frowned. What does that mean? The attorney leaned back in his chair. It means someone suggested waiting. Waiting for what? He chose his words carefully. waiting until you were already married before discussing certain financial matters. I felt my stomach tighten. Who suggested that? He slowly shook his head. I can't answer that. I looked at the handwritten note again. Whoever had written it had wanted me to make one of the biggest decisions of my life without knowing the full picture. That thought alone was enough to make my hands shake. The attorney opened another folder. This one contains correspondence, letters, emails, meeting notes. Most of them had nothing to do with me. Then he stopped at one page. This, you are allowed to read. He handed it over. It wasn't a contract. It was a meeting summary. One sentence stood out immediately. The family remains concerned about Daniel's long-term financial potential. Concerned. That word again, always wrapped in kindness, always hiding judgment. Below it was another line. Emily continues to express confidence in the relationship. I smiled sadly. At least at one point, Emily had defended me. But another sentence followed. Further conversations with family recommended before final decisions. Final decisions? What decisions? I looked up. Did Emily know about these meetings? The attorney paused for several seconds. I honestly don't know. And I won't guess. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was an honest one. Before I left, the attorney gave me one piece of advice. I've seen families destroyed by assumptions. Don't accuse anyone until you know the whole story. I appreciated those words, because anger had been growing inside me for weeks. But anger without proof only creates more damage. As I thanked him and walked toward the parking lot, my phone rang. Emily. Hey, she said cheerfully, Mom wants everyone over next weekend. Another family gathering. I closed my eyes for a moment. Sure, I replied calmly. I'll be there. After hanging up, I looked back at the office building. I had more questions than answers, but one thing had changed for years. I believed I had been rejected because I wasn't good enough. Now, I was beginning to wonder if someone had been carefully writing that story long before I ever had a chance to tell my own. And if that was true, then my next visit to that dinner table wouldn't be about earning respect. It would be about discovering who had been controlling the narrative all along. What I didn't know was that someone else had also realized I was getting close to the truth, and they were already making plans to stop me. The week passed more slowly than any I could remember. Every morning I went to work. Every evening I came home. From the outside, my life looked completely normal. Inside, nothing felt normal anymore. The retired attorney's words stayed with me. Don't accuse anyone until you know the whole story. I repeated that advice to myself almost every day because it was becoming harder to stay patient. Every clue seemed to point in one direction, but clues weren't proof, and I needed proof. 3 days before the next family dinner, something unusual happened at work. My assistant knocked gently on my office door. Daniel? There's a package for you. I don't recognize the sender. I looked at the small brown envelope. No company logo, no return address, just my name. Again. I waited until my assistant left before opening it. Inside was a flash drive. Nothing else, no note, no explanation. I plugged it into my office computer. Only one folder appeared. Its name was simple. Read this first. I clicked. Inside was a scanned copy of an old calendar. At first it looked ordinary. Then I noticed several dates had been circled in red. The engagement party, the wedding rehearsal, the wedding day, family dinners, anniversaries. Every important event in my relationship with Emily had been marked. In the corner of the page was a handwritten sentence. Notice who arranged every meeting. I leaned closer. Every circled date had one name written beside it. Margaret, my mother-in-law. Maybe that meant nothing. She often organized family gatherings, but then I noticed something else. Several events had tiny letters beside them. CRP. No explanation, just initials. What did they mean? Before I had time to think, my office phone rang. It was my manager. Daniel, Could you come to the conference room? I quickly removed the flash drive and slipped it into my pocket. The meeting lasted nearly an hour. By the time I returned to my office, something was wrong. The folder I had left on my desk was slightly open. I always closed it before leaving. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the cleaning staff had moved it. Still, a strange feeling settled over me. Someone had been inside my office. That evening, I stopped by a coffee shop before heading home. As I waited for my order, a familiar voice spoke behind me. "Daniel?" I turned around. It was Grandma Rose. She smiled warmly. "I thought that was you." We sat together by the window. For a few minutes, we talked about ordinary things: the weather, work, her garden. Then her smile faded. "I need to ask you something." "Of course. Have you been asking questions about the family?" I froze. "Why do you ask?" She lowered her voice. "Because people are nervous." "Who?" She looked around the cafe before answering. "I can't say. But I can tell you this. They weren't expecting you to start remembering." Remembering. The word caught my attention immediately. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "Sometimes people don't hide the truth. They simply distract you until you stop looking." Before I could ask another question, she reached into her purse and handed me an old photograph. "I've kept this for years." The picture showed Emily, her parents, and me. It had been taken at our engagement party. At first glance, it looked completely ordinary. Then Grandma Rose pointed toward the background. There, standing near the doorway, was a man I had never noticed before. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was watching us. "Who is he?" I asked. Grandma Rose shook her head slowly. "I don't know, but I saw him at more than one family event." A chill ran through me. The same man. At multiple events? Why? Before I could say anything else, Grandma Rose quietly stood up. "Be careful, Daniel. Some truths don't stay buried without help." She gently squeezed my shoulder and walked out of the cafe. I looked down at the photograph again. For years, I had stared at that picture and only seen happy memories. Now, I saw a stranger hidden in the background, watching, waiting, as though he had been part of the story from the very beginning. And somehow, I knew finding out who he was would bring me one step closer to the truth. I drove home with the old photograph resting on the passenger seat. Every time I stopped at a red light, I looked at it again. The stranger wasn't standing in the center of the picture. He wasn't posing. He almost looked like someone who had accidentally walked into the frame, and yet, he was looking directly toward Emily and me. Not at the decorations, not at the guests, at us. The more I looked, the more uneasy I became. That evening, Emily noticed the photograph on the kitchen table. "I haven't seen this in years," she said with a smile. She picked it up. Look how happy everyone was. I watched her expression carefully. Then I pointed toward the man in the background. "Do you know who he is?" She frowned. "I've never noticed him before." She looked closer. "No, I don't think I know him." Her answer sounded honest. At least I believed it did. Still, something about that picture refused to let go of me. The next morning, before work, I stopped by Grandma Rose's house. She welcomed me inside with her usual gentle smile. "I knew you'd come." "You did?" She laughed softly. "I've lived long enough to know when curiosity won't let someone sleep." I smiled for the first time in days. She poured 2 cups of tea and placed an old family photo album on the table. "I want to show you something." We slowly turned the pages together. Birthday parties, graduations, Christmas dinners, family vacations. Then she stopped on one page. There. Another photograph. Different year, different event, the same man. This time he was standing near Emily's father. Not talking, just watching. My heartbeat quickened. So he really was there more than once. Grandma Rose nodded. At least 3 times that I remember. Did nobody ever ask who he was? They probably knew. But I never did. I looked closer. The man's face seemed familiar now, not because I knew him, but because I'd seen him somewhere else. I just couldn't remember where. Later that afternoon, I scanned both photographs into my computer. I enlarged the background, sharpened the image, adjusted the brightness. The face became clearer. Then something unexpected happened. My phone rang. It was the retired attorney. "Daniel," he said. I remembered something after our meeting. I immediately reached for a notebook. "What is it?" "There was another person present during one of those early meetings. A consultant." "A consultant?" "Yes. He wasn't a lawyer. He specialized in financial planning for families." My eyes drifted back to the photograph on my screen. "What was his name?" There was a brief pause. "I'm not completely certain. But I believe his last name was Carter." Carter. The name echoed in my head. I looked again at the stranger's face. Could that be him? The attorney continued. "I don't know whether he's connected to your questions, but I thought you deserved to know." After thanking him, I ended the call. I opened my laptop and searched through old emails. Nothing. Then I checked an old folder of wedding documents. Buried inside a scanned guest list, I found a handwritten note. "Reserved seat, Mr. Carter." I stared at the words. He wasn't an accident. He had been invited. Someone wanted him there. The question was, why? And why had no one ever mentioned him? As I leaned back in my chair, another realization hit me. Every new answer uncovered another layer of the story, but none of it explained the most important question of all. Why had an entire family spent years convincing me that I wasn't enough? I was getting closer, close enough that people were starting to notice, and somewhere, someone was already preparing their next move before I could make mine. The name stayed in my head all night. Carter. Until a few hours earlier, he had been nothing more than a face hidden in the background of an old photograph. Now I knew he had been invited to our engagement party. He had attended family gatherings. And according to the retired attorney, he had been involved in meetings before my wedding. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a connection. The question was, what kind of connection? The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. Instead of opening my email, I opened the scanned guest list again. There it was, reserved seat, Mr. Carter. No first name, no company, nothing else. I searched through old wedding invoices, seating charts, and planning documents. Most of them listed family members and close friends, but Mr. Carter appeared only once, almost as if someone had added his name at the last minute. That bothered me. People don't usually invite strangers to engagement parties, especially not someone who wasn't introduced to the future groom. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. It was Grandma Rose. "Daniel," she said softly, "could you stop by this afternoon?" "Of course." "I found something that belongs to you." "To me?" "Yes. I think it's time you had it." Her house smelled of fresh bread, just as it always had. She led me to the living room and placed a small wooden box on the table. "I've kept this safe for years." I looked at her confused. "Why?" "Because I wasn't sure when you were ready." She handed me a small brass key. "Go ahead." I unlocked the box. Inside were several old birthday cards, a few photographs, and a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. Daniel. The handwriting wasn't Grandma Rose's. It wasn't Emily's either. "Who wrote this?" I asked. She looked down. "It was given to me the day after your wedding." "The day after?" She nodded. "Someone asked me to hold on to it, and only give it to you if I ever believed you were searching for the truth." My hands suddenly felt heavy. "Who gave it to you?" She hesitated. "I promised I wouldn't say." I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a single, folded page. The paper had yellowed with age. The message was short. If you're reading this, it means you've finally started asking the questions you should have asked years ago. Not everyone who smiled at your wedding wanted your marriage to succeed. Trust actions, not appearances. The answers you seek are connected to one decision made 6 months before the wedding. Start there. No signature, no date, nothing else. I read it twice, then a third time. 6 months before the wedding. What happened 6 months before the wedding? I closed my eyes, trying to remember. Then it came back. 6 months before the wedding? Emily had suddenly changed the date of our ceremony. At the time, she said the venue had become available earlier than expected. I had never questioned it. Now, I wasn't so sure. Grandma Rose watched me quietly. You remembered something. I nodded slowly. The wedding date. She didn't look surprised. Instead, she said something that sent a chill through me. Sometimes changing the timing changes everything. I looked at her. Do you know why it was changed? She shook her head. No, but I remember your mother-in-law insisting it couldn't wait. Couldn't wait. Why? What difference could a few months possibly have made? As I drove home, one thought refused to leave my mind. For years, I believed my life had been shaped by bad luck and family disapproval. Now, it felt as though someone had been carefully arranging events long before I realized I was part of the plan. And if I wanted the whole truth, I had to discover why that wedding date had been moved, because I was beginning to believe that one decision had changed the course of every year that followed. The envelope stayed on my mind for the rest of the evening. The answers you seek are connected to one decision made 6 months before the wedding. I spread every document I had collected across the dining room table. The old guest list, the photographs, the notebook, the anonymous letters, the meeting summaries. Individually, none of them proved very much. Together, they were beginning to tell a story no one had wanted me to hear. I decided to build a timeline, not based on emotions, based on facts. I wrote one date after another on a large sheet of paper. The day Emily and I met. The day we got engaged. The dinner with her parents. The wedding date change. The strange payment confusion. The anonymous rumors. The humiliating family dinners. My promotion. As I connected the dates with lines, something unexpected appeared. Almost every important event happened within a few days of one thing. A meeting between Emily's parents and someone else. Not always the attorney. Sometimes it was listed only as consultation. Other times, there was no name at all. I stared at the page. This wasn't random. It was a pattern. Just then, Emily walked into the room. She stopped when she saw the papers covering the table. What is all this? I hesitated for a moment. Then I decided not to lie. I'm trying to understand something. She looked at the photographs and old documents. You've been doing this every night. I know. She pulled out a chair and sat across from me. Daniel, what are you really looking for? I looked into her eyes. The truth. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she quietly picked up one of the old photographs. I miss these days, she whispered. So do I. There was a long silence. Then she asked something I never expected. Do you think we've changed? Or do you think we've finally started seeing people for who they really are? I wasn't prepared for that question. I don't know. She nodded slowly. I've been asking myself the same thing. For the first time in weeks, it felt like she wasn't defending her family. It felt like she was questioning them too. The next morning, I received another surprise. The retired attorney left me a voicemail. Daniel, I found one more file. I think you should see it. But not because of what's inside. He paused. Because of what's missing. I drove to his office immediately. When I arrived, the file was already waiting on his desk. It looked ordinary, just another folder among dozens of others. He opened it carefully. Inside, almost every page had been removed. Only the cover sheet remained. Across the top, in faded ink, were 4 words: Family Strategy Meeting. Below that, the date. Exactly 6 months before my wedding. I looked up at him. Where are the rest of the pages? He sighed. I don't know. They weren't missing when I retired. Someone had removed them. Recently. That realization sent a chill through me. If those pages had disappeared after all these years, someone knew they mattered. Someone knew I was getting close. The attorney leaned forward. Daniel, I don't believe in coincidences. Neither do I replied. As I left the office, I couldn't shake one terrifying thought. For years, I believed I had been searching for the past, but maybe the past had just realized I was searching for it, and somewhere, someone was already taking steps to make sure I never uncovered the final piece of the puzzle. After leaving the attorney's office, I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I pulled into a quiet park a few miles away and sat in my car. The missing pages changed everything. Until now, I believed I was uncovering forgotten memories. Now I knew someone had been actively removing pieces of the story. That meant one thing: the truth still mattered to someone. Enough to hide it. Enough to protect it. I looked at the empty folder one last time before placing it carefully in my briefcase. Then I made a decision. No more anonymous letters. No more guessing. No more waiting for clues to appear. If I wanted answers, I was going to ask the people who had been there from the beginning. That evening, I called Grandma Rose. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? She sounded surprised. Just the two of us? Yes. I need your help. The next afternoon, we met at a small family-owned restaurant across town. It was quiet, no loud music, no crowds, exactly what I needed. After we ordered, I placed the empty folder on the table. Grandma Rose looked at it without touching it. So, you found it. You've seen this before? She nodded slowly. Many years ago. I leaned forward. What was the family strategy meeting? She closed her eyes for a moment. When Emily announced that she wanted to marry you? Not everyone was happy. I know. She shook her head. No, you don't. There were concerns. But not everyone shared the same concerns. What do you mean? She sighed deeply. Your father-in-law worried about finances. Your brother-in-law worried about appearances. But your mother-in-law, she worried about something else. I waited. Control. The word hung in the air. She had spent years making every important decision for the family. Emily's education, her career, where she lived, who she spent time with. And then, you came into her life. I stared at Grandma Rose. She believed she was losing her influence. Grandma Rose nodded. Whether she realized it or not, she began treating you like the obstacle. Not because of who I was, but because I represented change. For the first time, the pieces truly began fitting together. Grandma Rose continued. She never needed everyone to hate you. She only needed them to doubt you. One doubt at a time, one comment at a time, one comparison at a time, year after year, until everyone stopped asking whether the criticism was fair and simply accepted it as normal. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness, because so many years had been shaped by quiet manipulation. Relief, because maybe I hadn't imagined it after all. Before we left, Grandma Rose reached into her handbag. I've held on to one last thing. She handed me a folded piece of paper. Unlike the anonymous letters, this one wasn't mysterious. It was a handwritten speech. I found it after your mother-in-law's birthday dinner, Grandma Rose explained. It must have slipped out of her notebook. I unfolded it. The first few lines matched the toast she had given that night. Then I reached a paragraph she had never spoken aloud. It read, If Daniel ever proves himself, welcome him with kindness. If he never does, Emily will eventually realize she deserves a different future. I read the sentence twice, then 3 times. She had already decided there were only two possible outcomes. Either I spent my life trying to earn approval, or I disappeared. There had never been room for acceptance, only conditions. I folded the paper carefully. I'm done trying to convince people of my worth. Grandma Rose smiled gently. I was hoping you'd finally say that. As I drove home, my phone rang. It was Emily. Can we talk tonight? Her voice sounded different, calmer, almost uncertain. Of course. I found something today. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. What did you find? There was a long silence. Then she quietly said, I think my mother lied to both of us. My heart skipped a beat. For months I had been searching for the truth alone. Now, Emily had found a piece of it herself. And whatever she had discovered, I knew our conversation that night would change everything. I arrived home earlier than usual. For the first time in months, I felt nervous in a different way, not because I was afraid of another argument, but because Emily had said something I never expected to hear. I think my mother lied to both of us. When I opened the front door, the house was unusually quiet. Emily was sitting alone at the kitchen table. There was no television, no music, just silence. In front of her sat a small cardboard box. She looked up as I walked in. We need to talk. I nodded and took the chair across from her. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she pushed the box toward me. I found this while cleaning my parents' attic today. I looked inside. Old greeting cards, photo albums, wedding magazines. Then, a bundle of letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. I've never seen these before, Emily whispered. They were hidden behind an old storage cabinet. I carefully untied the ribbon. The letters were addressed to Emily, but none of them had ever been opened. The first envelope was dated nearly a month before our wedding. Emily frowned. I don't remember getting these. I gently handed her the first letter. You should read it. She slowly opened the envelope. As her eyes moved across the page, her expression changed. Confusion, then surprise, then disbelief. What is it? I asked softly. She looked at me with tears forming in her eyes. This is from my aunt. What does it say? Emily took a shaky breath. She wrote that she was happy for us, and that she hoped I wouldn't let anyone pressure me into changing my mind. I frowned. Pressure you? Emily nodded. She says she could tell Mom wasn't happy about the wedding. We looked at each other. Neither of us spoke. Emily opened the second letter. This one was from an old college friend. She read silently before placing her hand over her mouth. What? She apologized. For missing the wedding. I thought she never replied to my invitation. Emily looked down at the letter. She says she waited for my new wedding date. Because Mom told her the ceremony had been postponed. I blinked. What? Emily's voice became barely a whisper. We never postponed it. No, we didn't. Someone had told guests the wrong information. Not everyone, just some of them. Enough to keep certain people away. Emily quickly searched through the remaining envelopes. Again and again. The same pattern appeared. Messages never delivered. Replies she had never seen. People asking why plans had suddenly changed. People mentioning conversations they supposedly had with her mother. Emily leaned back in her chair. I never knew. I believed her. The shock on her face couldn't be faked. For the first time, I wasn't looking at someone defending her family. I was looking at someone questioning everything she thought she knew. She wiped away a tear. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I reached across the table and gently held her hand. This isn't your fault. She looked at me. I should have listened to you. I should have asked more questions. I smiled sadly. We both trusted people we loved. She nodded. And someone used that trust. The room became quiet again, but this silence felt different. It wasn't filled with distance. It was filled with understanding, for the first time in years. We weren't standing on opposite sides. We were standing together. Then Emily reached back into the box. "There's one more thing." She handed me a small notebook. It belonged to Mom. My heart started beating faster. Inside were handwritten reminders, shopping lists, appointment dates, family birthdays. Then, one page stopped me cold. At the top, in neat handwriting, were 4 words: "Things to discuss before Saturday." Below them was a short checklist: talk to Robert, call Carter, change guest list, speak with Emily alone, don't mention Daniel. I read the last line again. Don't mention Daniel. Whatever had happened before our wedding, it hadn't been accidental. It had been planned. Emily slowly shook her head. "I don't even recognize this anymore." Neither did I. But at last, we weren't chasing rumors. We were holding evidence. And for the first time since that humiliating dinner, I knew the truth was no longer hiding. The only question left was, what would happen when the entire family was finally forced to face it? For a long time, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table without saying a word. Between us lay the notebook, the unopened letters, the handwritten checklist. None of it answered every question, but together, it painted a picture that neither of us could ignore. Emily looked exhausted. "I don't know how to face them." I understood exactly what she meant. Finding the truth was one thing. Confronting the people you loved was something else entirely. I reached for her hand. "We're not going there to fight." She nodded. "We're going there to listen. And to ask questions." For the first time in years, we were finally on the same side. The next morning, Emily made a phone call. She asked everyone to come to her parents' house on Sunday afternoon. Her mother sounded surprised. "A family meeting?" "Yes." "Why?" Emily answered calmly. "Because there are things we need to clear up." There was a long silence. Finally, her mother agreed. "Fine. We'll see everyone on Sunday." Sunday arrived. As we drove toward the house, neither of us spoke much. The notebook rested between us. Neither of us wanted to believe what it suggested, but pretending it didn't exist wouldn't change anything. When we arrived, the whole family was already there. My father-in-law, my brother-in-law, a few close relatives, even Grandma Rose. Everyone looked confused. My mother-in-law greeted us with her usual smile. "What's all this about?" Emily didn't answer immediately. She walked into the living room and placed the notebook on the coffee table. "I found this." The room suddenly became quiet. Her mother's smile faded for just a second. Then it returned. "Oh, that old thing?" Emily looked directly at her. "Yes. My old thing." "No," Emily replied. "Your notebook." No one spoke. Emily slowly opened it to the page with the checklist. "Can you explain this?" Her mother glanced down, then laughed softly. "You're making too much of ordinary notes." Emily didn't smile. "What does 'don't mention Daniel' mean?" Silence. Her mother crossed her arms. "I honestly don't remember." Emily turned another page. "What about call Carter?" Another pause. "I don't remember." Then another page. "What about changing the guest list?" My father-in-law shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My brother-in-law looked down at the floor. No one interrupted. Finally, I spoke. "I don't want an argument. I only want honest answers." My mother-in-law looked at me. "I've always been honest." Grandma Rose quietly cleared her throat. "Margaret, you don't have to protect the past anymore." The room fell completely silent. For the first time, someone besides me had challenged her. My mother-in-law looked at Grandma Rose with surprise. "You don't know what you're talking about." Grandma Rose answered gently. "I know more than you think." Emily reached into her bag and placed the unopened letters on the table. "I never received these." Her mother frowned. "What letters?" "The ones sent before my wedding." Emily opened one, then another, then another. Relatives around the room quietly leaned forward, one by one. The truth became impossible to ignore. Guests had been given different information. Family members had been told different stories. Friends believed the wedding had been postponed. Some believed Emily was reconsidering the marriage. Others believed I had changed my mind. Everyone had been told something different. No one had been told the whole truth. My father-in-law finally spoke. "Margaret." His voice was quiet. "Did you know about this?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the room, almost as though she was searching for someone to rescue her. No one did. For the first time in years, the room wasn't listening only to her. They were looking at the evidence, real evidence, not opinions, not rumors, not carefully chosen words, just facts. Emily's voice trembled. "Mom, please, I don't want excuses. I just want the truth." Tears filled her mother's eyes. She looked down at the notebook. Then, after what felt like forever, she whispered 3 words. "I was afraid." The room remained completely silent. Afraid of what? No one knew, but everyone understood one thing. For the first time, the truth had finally begun speaking for itself. No one spoke after those 3 words. "I was afraid." The room was so quiet that I could hear the ticking of the old clock hanging above the fireplace. Emily stared at her mother, waiting. "So, afraid of what?" she asked softly. Her mother didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at her hands. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't seem confident. She seemed tired. "I never hated you, Daniel," she finally said. I didn't respond. After everything that had happened, I had learned not to interrupt. She took a slow breath. "When Emily told us she wanted to marry you, I panicked." Emily frowned. "Why?" Her mother looked at her with tears in her eyes. "Because you were my only daughter. I had spent your entire life protecting you. I chose your schools. I helped you build your career. I solved every problem before you even knew it existed." She paused. "And then one day, you didn't need me anymore." The room remained silent. She continued, "I told myself I was protecting you. But the truth, I was protecting my place in your life." Those words hit everyone differently. Emily lowered her eyes. My father-in-law slowly leaned back in his chair. Even my brother-in-law looked uncomfortable. For years, they had all believed the story that I simply wasn't good enough. Now they were hearing something completely different. Her fear had slowly become control, and that control had become manipulation. "I never planned to destroy your marriage," she whispered. "I only wanted Emily to keep depending on me." Grandma Rose closed her eyes. "I was afraid that if your marriage became strong, our relationship would become weak." Emily's voice cracked. "So you made my marriage weak instead?" Her mother couldn't answer, because there was no answer that could erase the years. After a long silence, she nodded. "Yes." The single word landed heavier than any accusation ever could. I felt anger, sadness, relief, all at once. Not because everything was suddenly okay, but because after years of confusion, I finally knew I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been fighting against bad luck. I'd been fighting against someone's fear, and fear, left unchecked, had quietly shaped the lives of everyone in that room. Emily reached over and took my hand. She squeezed it tightly. Then she looked at her mother. "I spent years wondering why my husband always felt like an outsider. I kept asking him to be patient. I kept asking him to understand." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I should have been asking you why." Her mother began crying openly. "I'm sorry. I know those words can't fix anything, but I am." No one celebrated. There was no dramatic victory, no applause, because some truths don't bring happiness. They simply bring clarity, and sometimes, clarity is the first step toward healing. I looked around the room. For the first time, no one was judging me. No one was comparing salaries. No one was making jokes. The silence felt different now. It wasn't the silence of people hiding the truth. It was the silence of people finally facing it. As we prepared to leave, my father-in-law stopped me near the front door. He extended his hand. "I owe you an apology." I looked at him for a moment. Then I shook his hand. He continued quietly. "I spent years believing stories instead of asking questions. I should have known better." I nodded. We all should have. Emily and I walked to the car together. Before getting in, she looked back at the house. "It doesn't feel the same anymore." I followed her gaze. "No, it doesn't." Because that house had once represented everything I wanted to be accepted into. Now, it was simply a place where the truth had finally caught up with the past. As we drove away, I realized something important. The greatest revenge had never been exposing anyone. It had been refusing to become bitter despite everything that had happened. And although one chapter had finally ended, a new one was just beginning. Exactly 1 year passed after that family meeting. If someone had told me that my life would look completely different in just 12 months, I never would have believed them. Not because everything had become perfect, but because everything had finally become honest. And honesty has a way of changing people. Emily and I made one important decision after that day. We stopped trying to please everyone. For years, every holiday, birthday, and family dinner had been built around one question. Will they approve? Now we asked a different question. Will this bring us peace? That single change transformed our lives. Some invitations we accepted, others we politely declined. For the first time, our choices belonged to us, not to other people's expectations. My relationship with work changed too. I stopped measuring success by whether someone else was impressed. Instead, I focused on becoming better than I had been the day before. The promotion I'd once celebrated quietly became the foundation for even greater opportunities. A few months later, I was asked to lead one of the company's biggest projects. This time, I accepted with confidence, not because I needed to prove anyone wrong, but because I finally believed in myself. The strange thing was, the moment I stopped chasing approval, success seemed to find me on its own. Emily changed in ways that surprised even her. She began setting healthy boundaries. When someone criticized our decisions without reason, she no longer stayed silent. She answered calmly, respectfully, but firmly. The woman who once avoided difficult conversations had found her voice. One evening, she smiled at me and said, "You know what I've learned?" "What?" "Love isn't choosing between your family and your spouse. It's choosing honesty, even when honesty is uncomfortable." I smiled. I wish we'd learned that sooner. So do I. As for my mother-in-law, things didn't magically return to normal. Trust takes much longer to rebuild than it does to break. She apologized more than once, not only to me, but to Emily, to my father-in-law, even to Grandma Rose. At first, I wasn't sure whether I believed those apologies. Words alone weren't enough anymore. But over time, something changed. She stopped trying to control every decision. She listened more. She spoke less. She accepted that love couldn't be protected through manipulation. It could only survive through trust. That change didn't erase the past, but it gave everyone a chance to build a different future. One Saturday afternoon, nearly a year after the confrontation, we gathered again for a family dinner. Ironically, it was in the same dining room where everything had fallen apart. As I walked through the front door, memories came rushing back. The jokes, the silence, the humiliation. For a moment, I stood completely still. Emily gently squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I smiled. "Yeah. This room just reminds me how far we've come." Dinner that night felt different. No comparisons, no hidden insults. No one measured anyone's worth by a paycheck. People simply talked, laughed, shared stories. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Halfway through dinner, my mother-in-law stood up. The room instantly became quiet. For a second, I remembered the birthday toast from the year before. She looked at me, then at everyone else. "I want to say something." She took a deep breath. "A year ago, I confused control with love. I believed I knew what was best for everyone. I was wrong." She looked directly at me. "Daniel, thank you for showing more patience than I deserved." Then she added something I never expected to hear. You didn't take my daughter away from me. You taught me how to let her live her own life." No one clapped. No one cheered. But I noticed something much more meaningful. Emily smiled. A genuine smile. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because the truth no longer had to hide. And in that moment, I realized the greatest victory wasn't making someone regret what they'd done. It was helping everyone finally become honest enough to change. The dinner that had once broken my heart had quietly become the place where our family began healing. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It had become something far more powerful. It had become a story about choosing dignity over resentment, truth over appearances, and growth over bitterness. Only one final lesson remained to be told. If you had asked me, on the night I walked out of that birthday dinner, what I wanted most, I would have answered without hesitation. I want them to regret what they did. At the time, that felt like justice. I imagined the day they would finally realize they had underestimated me. I imagined them apologizing. I imagined proving every one of them wrong. For months, that thought kept me moving forward. But something changed along the way. The closer I came to the truth, the less interested I became in revenge, because I realized something important. Winning isn't making someone else lose. Winning is refusing to let someone else's opinion decide your value. Looking back now, I can see the mistakes I made too. I stayed silent for too long. I confused patience with acceptance. I believed that if I just worked harder, if I earned a little more, if I became a little more successful, people would finally respect me. But respect that depends on performance isn't respect at all. It's approval. And approval can disappear the moment you stop meeting someone's expectations. Real respect doesn't work that way. It begins with respecting yourself. Sometimes people ask me, "Do you forgive them?" The answer isn't as simple as yes or no. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It isn't pretending the pain never happened. Forgiveness is deciding that the past will no longer control your future. I remember everything: the jokes, the silence, the dinner where everyone laughed while I felt completely alone. I remember every painful moment, but those memories no longer define me. They remind me how far I've come. Emily and I still face challenges, like every couple does. We disagree sometimes, we make mistakes, we apologize, we learn. The difference now is that our marriage belongs to us, not to fear, not to expectations, not to anyone else's approval. That is the greatest gift we could have given each other. A few weeks ago, I found myself standing in front of that same dining room window, the same one I had walked past on the worst night of my life. This time, I wasn't looking inside. I was looking at my reflection. For the first time in years, I didn't see a man trying to prove he was enough. I saw a man who already knew he was. That quiet realization meant more than any apology I had ever received. If you're listening to my story today, maybe you've experienced something similar. Maybe you've been underestimated. Maybe someone has made you feel as though you'll never be good enough. Maybe you've spent years trying to earn approval that never comes. If that's you, please remember this. You cannot build your confidence on someone else's permission. No amount of success will satisfy people who have already decided not to see your worth. But the moment you begin believing in yourself, their opinions lose the power they once had. I used to think that dinner ruined my life. Now I see it differently. That dinner revealed the truth, and painful truth is always better than comfortable lies, because once you know the truth, you're finally free to choose a different future. So, if there's one lesson my journey taught me, it's this: never let someone else's fear become the measure of your future. Never shrink yourself just to fit inside another person's expectations. And never believe that kindness is weakness. Kindness, when combined with courage, becomes one of the strongest forces a person can possess. The people who humiliated me believed they had written the final chapter of my story. They were wrong. They had only written the ending of one chapter. The rest of the story was mine to write. And for the first time, I picked up the pen myself.